How dare you? The pull was brutal. Rip! Emily felt the dress tear open, the cold on her back, eyes piercing like needles. How dare you walk in dressed like a guest? Victoria Ashford released her with disgust, letting the white fabric scraps fall to the floor. You're a cleaner. Silence. 200 people staring, phones rising, muffled laughter starting to surface. Emily couldn't move. Her hands tried to cover her bare back. One of her shoes had flown off. Cold marble beneath her feet, the murmur growing like a wave. Look at her, someone said. How embarrassing, another voice whispered. Who let her in like that? Victoria smiled, diamonds shining on her neck, perfect red lips. Someone get her out of here. Emily looked up, and then she saw him. A man at the top of the staircase, dark suit, gray eyes locked on her, motionless, not smiling, not laughing like the others, just watching. And something in that gaze made the ground beneath Emily's feet cease to exist, because that man had seen everything, and no one knew who he was. If this story already touched your heart in this first minute, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe in human goodness again. 3 hours earlier, Emily Carter had arrived at the Ashford estate with her stomach in knots. It wasn't fear exactly, it was something worse. It was the feeling of always being about to be discovered, like she wore an invisible sign that said, "You don't belong here." And she was right. Emily had been born in Detroit, in a neighborhood where streets had no official names, and houses stood more on faith than concrete. Her mother, Sarah Carter, had worked her entire life in factories, cleaning offices, doing the impossible so Emily could study. And she succeeded. Emily had earned a scholarship to study engineering. She was brilliant. She had a future. But then her mother died. An industrial accident. There were never clear explanations. There was never justice. Just a miserable check and a legal letter that basically said, "Sign here and don't ask questions." Emily signed, because she had 2 younger siblings to feed. She left university, sold everything, and came to New York with a suitcase and a broken dream. 2 years later, she was still cleaning. But now she did it in glass mansions where people threw away more food in one night than her family ate in a month. The Ashford estate was the most impressive of all. Glass walls touching the sky, gardens designed by award-winning architects, a fountain in the center where water fell like liquid silk. And that night, a party. 200 guests, business people, politicians, people whose last names appeared on buildings and streets, people who would never look twice at someone like Emily, except to humiliate her. The uniform they'd given her was a simple white dress, elegant but clearly for staff, or at least that's what they'd told her. But when Emily entered the main hall carrying a tray of glasses, something happened. Victoria Ashford saw her from across the room, and something in her gaze changed. Victoria was the hostess, the owner of all this. 42 years that looked like 30 thanks to treatments that cost more than a car. Perfect black hair. Red dress hugging every curve. Diamonds capturing light like stolen stars. She was beautiful, and she was cruel. She crossed the room like a predator. Her heels clicked against the marble with a rhythm that made several conversations stop. "Excuse me?" Victoria said, with a sweet voice that didn't reach her eyes. "Who gave you permission to wear that dress?" Emily blinked. It's the uniform they gave me, ma'am." "Uniform?" Victoria laughed, a sharp laugh that made heads turn. "That's a guest dress. Do you think you're a guest?" "No, You know what your problem is?" Victoria moved closer. Her perfume was so strong it made you dizzy. "People like you never understand their place." And then it happened. Victoria reached out, grabbed the dress fabric at the shoulder, and pulled. Rai-pee. The sound was obscene, final, like something dying. The dress tore completely down the back. The cheap fabric didn't resist. The threads snapped like rotted strings. Emily felt the cold air, the hot stares, the entire world collapsing on her. "There," Victoria said, dropping the scraps with contempt. "Now you look like what you are." The laughter started soft, then louder, like an avalanche. Phones rose, flashes, videos. Emily could hear the clicks, could imagine the headlines, the memes, the viral mockery. Her hands trembled as she tried to cover her back, but there was no way. The dress hung useless. One of her shoes was meters away, her bare feet on the frozen marble. "Someone call security," Victoria said, turning away as if Emily no longer existed. And then Emily looked up. She didn't know why. Maybe searching for an exit. Maybe just wanting to find a face that wasn't laughing. And she found it. At the top of the spiral staircase leading to the second floor, there was a man. Impeccable dark suit, maybe 50 years old. Gray hair at the temples, square jaw. But what Emily noticed were his eyes. Gray, cold, piercing. And they were locked on her. Not with pity, not with mockery, with something Emily couldn't decipher. The man didn't move, didn't take out his phone, didn't laugh, just observed, as if memorizing every detail, every second of that humiliation. For an instant, just an instant, their gazes met, and Emily felt something that made no sense, an electric current, an inexplicable certainty. That man was going to change everything. 2 security guards arrived then. They grabbed her arms with more force than necessary. "Let's go, miss," one said, dragging her toward the back exit. Emily didn't resist. She had no strength. She let them remove her like trash, while laughter continued echoing behind her. But before the door closed, she looked one last time toward the staircase. The man was still there, motionless, watching, and something in his expression had changed. There was rage there, cold, calculated, deadly. Emily didn't know it yet, but that man had a name, Richard Ashford, and he was Victoria's husband. What no one knew was that man was Victoria's husband. Richard Ashford didn't come down the stairs. He stayed upstairs, on the second-floor balcony, while the party continued below as if nothing had happened. As if a woman hadn't just been destroyed in public. As if his wife hadn't just ripped the dignity from another person for pure entertainment. The laughter continued. The music played again. Glasses filled once more. And Richard felt something he hadn't felt in years. Disgust. He wasn't an emotional man. He'd been trained not to be. 48 years building an empire. Ashford Energy Corporation, renewable energy, clean technology, contracts with governments. His name on buildings in 15 countries. He'd learned to read financial statements before human emotions. But that night, something broke. He looked down at the hall where Victoria laughed, surrounded by her friends. All identical, all perfect, all empty. He'd been married to Victoria for 18 years. The first 5 had been good, or at least that's what he told himself. She was beautiful, intelligent, ambitious. She came from a family with political connections that had helped expand his company. But at some point, Victoria stopped being a person. She became a character, a mask of perfection held up by surgeries, treatments, and a cruelty that grew like cancer. And Richard had allowed it. For convenience, for the company, for not wanting to admit he'd built his life on rotten foundations. But that night, seeing that woman, that cleaner, that nobody, according to Victoria, be humiliated that way, something inside Richard awakened. He took out his phone, dialed a number. "James," he said when they answered, "I need information about the woman who worked tonight. The one Victoria, you know which one." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir?" "Her name. Where she lives. Who she is. Everything. May I ask why?" "No." Richard hung up. He went down the stairs slowly, crossed the hall without looking at anyone. Victoria tried to reach him, but he ignored her. He went out to the back garden where the air was cleaner, and waited. 25 minutes later, his phone rang. "Her name is Emily Carter," said James, his personal assistant. "American. 27 years old. Came to New York 2 years ago. Works for the catering company we hired. Lives in Queens. Shares an apartment with 3 other women. Family? Deceased mother. 2 younger siblings in Detroit. Education? There was a longer pause. This is interesting, sir. She had a full scholarship to study mechanical engineering at the University of Michigan. Second in her class. Specialization in renewable energy. Richard stopped. What happened? She dropped out in her 3rd year. After her mother's death. How did the mother die? Industrial accident. Chemical processing plant. Very little official information. Richard closed his eyes. He knew that kind of accident. Companies paid to make them disappear from records. Entire families silenced with miserable checks and confidentiality agreements. "Send me everything you have," he said. "Yes, sir. May I ask—" No. He hung up again. Richard stayed in the garden until the party ended. Until the guests left. Until Victoria went up to her room without even looking for him. They'd slept in separate rooms for 3 years. The next morning, Richard was in his office at 6, reading the complete file on Emily Carter. There were photos. Young, smiling, at her scholarship ceremony, impeccable school uniform, bright eyes full of future. There were certificates, perfect grades, academic recognition, recommendation letters from professors speaking of extraordinary potential and brilliant mind. And there was a legal document, compensation agreement for Sarah Carter's death, hastily signed, ridiculous amount. Confidentiality clause. Richard reviewed the name of the company responsible for the accident and felt his blood freeze. Carter Industrial, a subsidiary that Ashford Energy Corporation had acquired 4 years ago. Technically, he owned the company that had killed Emily's mother. And worse still, he reviewed internal records, legal documents, communications. Victoria had been in charge of closing that case. Victoria had been the one who pressured the Carter family to sign. Who buried the investigation? Who paid the minimum possible so everything would disappear? Richard dropped the papers. For the first time in 18 years of marriage, he felt something clear and definitive toward his wife. Hatred. That afternoon, he called James again. "I need you to contact Emily Carter." "For what, sir?" "Tell her I have a job offer, private event, well paid, and tell her it's not cleaning." "Sir?" "Tell her I need someone with renewable energy knowledge. Someone who can speak with investors. Someone intelligent." "But she's—" "I know what she is," Richard cut in, "and I know what she was, and I know what she can become again." There was silence. "Does this have to do with last night?" "It has to do with justice," Richard said. "Something I forgot existed." He hung up. And for the first time in years, Richard Ashford smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just declared war. Emily accepted the offer, not imagining she'd be the center of attention again. Emily didn't want to accept. When she received the call from someone named James, personal assistant to an important businessman, her first instinct was to hang up. 3 days had passed since the humiliation at the Ashford estate. 3 days without sleeping well. 3 days seeing her face in videos that had gone viral. Cleaner humiliated at Millionaire's party. Woman destroyed for not knowing her place. The comments were worse. Some defended her, most mocked. But what hurt most was that they were right. She didn't belong in that world. She never would. "Miss Carter," James said on the phone with a professional but surprisingly kind voice. "I know you probably don't want to work events again, but this is different." "I'm not interested," Emily said, ready to hang up. "It's a small event, 30 people, international investors, and we don't need you to clean. We need you to speak." Emily frowned. "Speak about what?" "Solar energy, renewable technology. My boss reviewed your academic record. He knows you studied engineering, and he needs someone who can explain technical concepts clearly." Emily's heart raced. No one had called her an engineer in 2 years. "I left university." "But you didn't stop being brilliant," James said. Look, I know it sounds strange, but the pay is good, very good, and my boss was specific. He wants to give you an opportunity. Why? There was a pause. Because he knows what it's like to be in the wrong place, James said, and he believes you're in the wrong place too. Emily closed her eyes. She needed the money. She always needed money. Her siblings in Detroit depended on every dollar she sent. When? Tomorrow night. I'll send you the address. And Miss Carter, dress professionally, not as staff. He hung up. Emily stared at the phone, not knowing if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The address James sent wasn't a mansion. It was a hotel. One of those boutique hotels in Manhattan where rooms cost $1,000 a night. Emily arrived 15 minutes early wearing the only suit she had. She'd bought it at a second-hand store. Black pants, white blouse, jacket a bit too big, but she looked professional, or at least she hoped so. James met her in the lobby. He was a man around 40, with glasses and a serious but not cruel expression. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, Emily admitted. You're going to help present a project, nothing more, and you'll receive $2,000 for tonight. Emily almost choked. What? My boss believes in paying fairly, James said. Now, are you ready? She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. He took her to a private room on the 3rd floor. It was elegant but intimate. A long table, 30 chairs, projector, screen, and at the head of the table, with his back turned, reviewing documents. Emily felt the world stop. That man, the one from the staircase, the one with gray eyes. He turned around, and their gazes met for the second time. Miss Carter, said Richard Ashford, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Emily couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. It was him, the man who'd seen everything, who'd witnessed her humiliation without doing anything. What was he doing here? Why had he called her? I know we met under unfortunate circumstances, Richard said, with a calm but firm voice. And I'd understand if you decide to leave right now. But I'd like to offer you something. What? Emily barely managed to whisper. An opportunity to prove what you really are, not what others say you are. Emily felt tears burning her eyes, but didn't let them fall. Why would you do that? Richard looked at her directly. Because I also know what it's like to be invisible, and you don't deserve to be. The investors arrived an hour later. Men and women from 15 countries, Japanese, Germans, Brazilians, all with fortunes Emily couldn't even imagine. And Richard introduced her. This is Emily Carter, renewable energy technology specialist. She'll explain the project to you. Emily felt 30 pairs of eyes on her. But Richard had given her a script. Clear, simple, technical but accessible. And she knew it, because it was about 3rd-generation solar panels, energy efficiency, implementation costs, everything she'd studied before her life collapsed. She started speaking, slowly at first, then more confident. The words flowed. Concepts she'd buried for 2 years surfaced as if they'd never left. She spoke about photovoltaic cells, lithium battery storage, cost reduction through economies of scale. And the investors listened. They asked questions, and she answered them, without hesitation, because she knew the answers, because she was brilliant, and she'd forgotten it. When she finished, there was silence, then applause. Emily looked at Richard. He wasn't applauding, just watching her with something that seemed like pride. But then the room door opened, and the last person Emily expected to see walked in. Victoria Ashford, emerald green dress, sky-high heels, shark smile. Darling, she said, looking at Richard, I didn't know you had guests tonight. I came to... She stopped. Her eyes locked on Emily, and recognition was instant. You? Victoria's voice was pure venom. What is this cleaner doing here? The room froze. Richard stood up slowly. Emily isn't a cleaner. She's an engineer. Engineer? Victoria laughed. Please, she's a... Careful with the next word. Richard's voice was cutting ice. Because this woman just impressed 30 investors representing $500 million. What did you do today, Victoria? The silence was sepulchral. Victoria looked at her husband as if he were a stranger. You're defending her? After what? After what you did, Richard cut in. Yes, I'm defending her. The investors murmured uncomfortably. Victoria took a step forward, eyes shining with fury. This woman is nothing. She has no education. She doesn't have... She had a full scholarship at the University of Michigan, Richard said. Second in her class. Specialization in renewable energy. She dropped out because her mother died in an industrial accident that was covered up. Victoria went pale. Richard, an accident at a company we bought. A case you closed by paying pennies and threatening the family. Now Victoria was white as paper. That's confidential. Not anymore, Richard said. He looked at Emily. Miss Carter, did you know I technically own the company that killed your mother? Emily felt the floor disappear. What? Carter Industrial. We acquired it 4 years ago, and when I reviewed the legal files, I found your case, and found how it was handled. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks uncontrollably. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth, Richard said, and because I'm going to repair what was done wrong. Victoria took a step back. You're insane. No, Richard said. I'm awake, for the first time in years. He looked at the investors. Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the drama, but I think we all just witnessed something important. The difference between having money and having dignity. He turned to Emily. Miss Carter, can we talk privately? Emily nodded, still in shock. They left the room, leaving Victoria trembling with rage. In a private office, Richard closed the door. I'm sorry, he said. I should have warned you she might appear. What's happening? Emily could barely speak. Why are you doing this? Richard took a deep breath. Because I saw what she did to you. And because I discovered my company, my family, is responsible for destroying yours. And because... He stopped. Because I have the means to repair this. And if I don't, then I'm as guilty as she is. You don't know me, Emily said. Why do you care? Because you reminded me of something I forgot, Richard said. That money without purpose is poison, and I've been poisoning myself for years. He took out an envelope. Here are the original documents from your mother's case, uncensored, and a proposal. What kind of proposal? Work, real work, in my company, innovation department, fair salary, and funds to finish your degree if you want. Emily looked at him as if he were speaking another language. This isn't real. It's as real as your humiliation was 3 days ago, Richard said. And if you're going to go viral for something, let it be for proving no one can define you except yourself. Emily took the envelope with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Richard said, and let the world see who you really are. Emily accepted, not knowing Richard had just declared a war that would end up destroying everything. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks in which Emily's life changed in ways she couldn't process. Richard kept every promise. He gave her a small but bright office in the Ashford Energy Corporation building, assigned her a salary 5 times what she'd earned cleaning, introduced her to the innovation team as our new renewable energy consultant, and no one dared question the boss. Well, almost no one. Victoria Ashford was furious. Emily saw her sometimes in the building hallways. Victoria still had an office there, though her role was more decorative than functional. Vice President of Public Relations, an empty title to keep her occupied. Every time they crossed paths, Victoria looked at her with hatred so pure it could burn. But she couldn't do anything, because Richard had shielded her. One afternoon, James knocked on Emily's office door. Mr. Ashford wants to see you in his private office. Emily felt a knot in her stomach. She'd avoided being alone with Richard since that night at the hotel. Not because she was afraid of him, but because she didn't understand his motives, and that terrified her more. No one did this. No one helped without expecting something in return. She went up to the top floor. Richard's office occupied the entire east wing, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking New York. Minimalist, cold, like him. Richard was standing by the window looking at the city. "Please sit." Emily sat in one of the leather armchairs. "Did something happen?" Richard turned around. He had a file in his hands. "I've been reviewing your mother's case." Emily felt the air escape. "Why?" "Because something didn't add up," Richard said. "The compensation your family received was ridiculous. But what bothered me most was how quickly the case closed. 2 weeks. In industrial accident cases, investigations take months." "They pressured us to sign," Emily said, her voice breaking. "They said if we didn't sign, we'd receive nothing, that we could fight in court for years and lose anyway." Richard nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. So I hired a private investigator, someone external, someone who has no ties to my company." He placed the file on the table between them. "What did he find?" Emily asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "That your mother's accident wasn't accidental." The silence that followed was dense, heavy, as if all the gravity in the world had concentrated in that office. "What?" Emily could barely form the word. "There were multiple safety reports at that plant. Warnings about defective machinery, ignored protocols, and when the accident occurred, someone deleted those reports from the system." Richard opened the file and took out documents, emails, photographs, technical reports. "Your mother and 3 other people died because someone decided repairing that machinery was too expensive. And after the accident, someone decided it was cheaper to silence the families." Emily couldn't breathe. "Who?" Richard hesitated. For the first time since she'd known him, Emily saw him waver. "Victoria was in charge of that acquisition. She handled the integration of Carter Industrial into Ashford Energy Corporation. She received the safety reports, and she ignored them." "She killed my mother?" Emily's voice was a broken whisper. "Legally, no. Morally, yes." Emily stood up. Her legs trembled. "And you? Did you know?" "No," Richard said, and there was something in his voice that sounded like truth. "I didn't know until I started investigating after meeting you. And when I discovered—" He stopped, his jaw clenched. "When I discovered, I understood who I've been married to all these years." Emily brought her hands to her face. Tears fell uncontrollably now. "Why are you telling me this? Why not just bury it like she did?" Richard shook his head. "Because you deserve the truth, and because I'm going to do something about it." "What can you do? It's already happened. My mother is dead. My siblings grew up without her. She broke. The crying came out like a torrent she'd been holding back for 2 years. Richard didn't move, didn't try to console her with empty words, just waited, respectful, silent. When Emily could finally speak again, her voice was different, harder. "What are you going to do?" "There's something else you need to know," Richard said. "Your mother had shares in Carter Industrial, small ones, part of a compensation program for long-term employees. When Ashford Energy Corporation acquired Carter, those shares should have converted to our company shares. We didn't receive any shares. I know, because Victoria registered them as unclaimed and absorbed them. Technically, she stole them." Emily felt rage replacing pain. "How much are they worth?" "Today, with Ashford Energy Corporation's current valuation, approximately $800,000. The world stopped. "What?" "Your mother left you an inheritance," Richard said, "and my wife stole it." Emily didn't know whether to laugh or scream or break something. "Why? She has millions. Why steal from a family that had nothing?" "Because she could," Richard said simply. "Because people like Victoria don't measure wealth by what they have, but by what they can take from others." He approached Emily. For the first time, there was something warm in his gray eyes. "I'm going to recover those shares. I'm going to expose her publicly. And I'm going to make sure you receive every cent you're owed." "Why are you doing this?" Emily looked at him directly. Guilt? Pity? Justice, Richard said. Something I forgot existed until I saw you standing in that hall with your dignity destroyed. And I realized I'd allowed it to happen, that I'd built my life alongside someone capable of that. He took a deep breath. I'm going to divorce Victoria. And before I do, I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly who she is. That will destroy your company, Emily said. Your reputation. My company will survive if it's built on honest foundations. And my reputation, Richard smiled humorlessly. I never cared about it as much as I should have. Emily looked at him for a long moment. What do you need from me? Your testimony, your story, and your permission to make it public. When? In 2 weeks. We have the annual Ashford Energy Corporation Gala. 500 people. International press. It will be broadcast live. Emily felt fear climbing her spine. You want me to speak in front of 500 people? I want you to prove the viral video from a month ago doesn't define you, Richard said. I want the world to see who Emily Carter really is. And I want Victoria to understand she can't destroy people without consequences. Emily closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, about her siblings, about all the years cleaning floors while people ignored her. She thought about the torn dress, the laughter, the humiliation, and she thought about something her mother used to say. Honey, dignity isn't given to you by anyone, and no one can take it away unless you hand it over. She opened her eyes. I'll do it. Richard extended his hand. Then let's work together. Emily shook his hand. And in that moment, something changed between them. It wasn't exactly friendship, not exactly alliance either. It was something deeper. It was recognition. Two people who'd been invisible for different reasons, finally seeing each other. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She stayed awake reading the documents Richard had given her. Every email, every report, every piece of evidence of the negligence that had killed her mother. And each page fed the fire growing in her chest. At 3 in the morning, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Emily Carter. The voice was female. Cold. Calculated. This is Victoria Ashford. Emily sat up in bed, completely awake now. How did you get my number? That doesn't matter, Victoria said. What matters is you understand something. My husband is playing with you. I don't know what you're talking about. Richard is a bored man looking for thrills, and you're his charity project of the month. But when he gets tired, and believe me he will, you'll go back to being exactly what you are. A cleaner. Emily felt rage boiling. Are you finished? No. Victoria's voice hardened. If you go ahead with whatever he's planning, I'll destroy you. And this time it won't be just a dress. I'll make it so you can't work anywhere in this city. I'll make your family in Detroit lose everything. I have the resources and I have no limits. Are you finished now? Are you listening to me? Victoria almost shouted. Yes, Emily said, with a calm she didn't know she had. I heard you, and now you listen to me. You already took my mother from me. You already humiliated me in public. You already tried to destroy me. You know what that means? What? That I have nothing left to lose. And you have everything. So ask yourself who should be afraid here. Emily hung up. Her hands trembled. Her heart beat like a war drum. But for the first time in 2 years, Emily Carter didn't feel fear. She felt power. Richard had found something else in the files. Something that would change everything and make Emily the owner of her own destiny. The night of the gala, New York was shining. Lincoln Center was lit up like a crystal palace. Red carpet, photographers, television cameras. 500 people dressed in more money than Emily had seen in her life. And she was there, not as staff, not as invisible, as a guest. Richard had sent her a dress, not white this time, black, elegant, simple but perfectly cut. And a handwritten note. Clothes don't make the person, but sometimes they help remind the world to pay attention. Emily entered the theater with trembling legs. James waited for her at the entrance. You look beautiful, he said with a genuine smile. Ready? No, Emily admitted. Perfect. The best things happen when we're not ready. He took her to a private box. From there, she could see the entire theater, the enormous stage, the seats filled with executives, politicians, investors, press, and in the center of the presidential box, Victoria Ashford, golden dress, diamonds capturing every light, perfect smile painted on her face. She didn't know what was coming. Richard went up on stage at 8 o'clock sharp. The theater fell silent. Good evening. His voice filled the space. Thank you for joining us at the annual Ashford Energy Corporation Gala. Tonight, we're not only celebrating our achievements of the year, we're also confronting our mistakes. There were confused murmurs. Victoria tensed in her seat. 4 years ago, Richard continued, my company acquired Carter Industrial, a business decision, numbers on paper. But behind those numbers, there were people. And some of those people died because we chose profits over safety. The theater was completely silent now. Tonight, I want to introduce you to someone who represents everything I did wrong, and everything I'm going to do right from now on. He looked toward the box where Emily was. Emily Carter, will you join me? Emily's heart stopped beating. James offered her his hand. This is your moment. Emily went down the stairs, walked down the center aisle. Each step felt like walking toward a precipice, but she didn't stop. She went up on stage. 500 people were looking at her, and this time she looked back. Richard offered her the microphone. The floor is yours. Emily took it. Her hands trembled, but her voice came out clear. My name is Emily Carter. A month ago, many of you saw me in a video where I was publicly humiliated, where my dress was torn, where I was treated like trash. Pause. The theater was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. That video went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Some defended me. Most mocked. But they all had something in common. None of them knew who I really was. Emily took a deep breath. I'm the daughter of Sarah Carter, a woman who worked her entire life so I could study. A woman who died in an industrial accident that could have been prevented. An accident that was covered up. An accident for which justice was never done. Murmurs began. That accident occurred at a plant now owned by Ashford Energy Corporation, and the person who closed that case, who paid my family a pittance and made us sign not to speak, is here tonight. Emily looked directly at the presidential box. Victoria Ashford. Cameras turned. Flashes exploded. Victoria was pale, paralyzed. But this story isn't about revenge, Emily continued. It's about dignity, about reminding the world that invisible people, the ones who clean your offices, who serve your food, who are never named, also have stories, also have value, also deserve justice. Her voice grew stronger. They took my mother from me. They took my education. They took my future. But they couldn't take one thing, my voice. And tonight I use it, not just for me, for all the people who've been crushed by people who believe money gives them the right to destroy lives. The theater erupted. Applause, shouts, chaos. Victoria stood up and ran out of the box. Richard approached Emily. There's more, he whispered. Are you ready? Emily nodded. Richard took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I've investigated the Carter case exhaustively, and I've discovered more than negligence. I've discovered theft. The giant screens behind the stage lit up. Legal documents, emails, evidence. Sarah Carter had shares in Carter Industrial worth $800,000 today. Those shares were stolen, and tonight, publicly, I returned them to their rightful heir, Emily Carter. The theater exploded again. Emily couldn't process what was happening. Furthermore, Richard continued, I announced the creation of the Sarah Carter Fund, a $5 million fund for families affected by corporate negligence, and I name Emily Carter as its director. Emily felt tears falling. And finally, Richard's voice hardened, I announce I've initiated legal proceedings against Victoria Ashford for criminal negligence, cover-up, and fraud, and that I'm initiating divorce proceedings. The chaos was total now. Journalists running, cameras recording, people shouting questions. Richard turned to Emily. "Are you okay?" Emily couldn't speak, just nodded. And then she did something that surprised them both. She hugged him. It wasn't a romantic hug. It was a hug of gratitude, of recognition, of two people who'd found redemption in each other. The cameras captured that moment, and it went viral. But this time, for the right reasons. But among the applause, a woman in the last row watched everything with a strange expression and had information that would change the story forever. The day after the gala, the world had changed. The video of Emily's speech had 30 million views. The hashtags, "Justice for Emily" and "Dignity is not for sale" were trending worldwide. Dozens of families contacted the Sarah Carter Fund with their own stories of corporate negligence, and Victoria Ashford was destroyed. She'd fled the gala. She'd given no statements. Her social media accounts had been closed. Richard's lawyers had filed a formal lawsuit with overwhelming evidence. Emily should feel victorious. But something wouldn't let her rest. During the gala, right after her speech, she'd seen someone. An older woman, maybe 65, sitting alone in the theater's last row, dressed simply, no jewelry, no companion. And that woman had looked at her with an intensity that raised goosebumps. When Emily came down from the stage, she looked for the woman, but she'd disappeared. 3 days later, Emily was in her new office, much larger now, overlooking New York Harbor, when James knocked on the door. "There's someone who wants to see you. Says it's urgent." "Who?" She didn't give her name, just said, "I'm a friend of Sarah Carter." Emily felt her heart stop. "Send her in." The woman who entered was the same one from the gala. Gray hair pulled into a simple bun. Wrinkles, speaking of years of hard work. Brown eyes shining with intelligence. "Miss Carter," she said, with a marked American accent. "My name is Margaret Ross, and I have something to tell you about your mother." Emily offered her a seat. "How did you know my mom?" "We worked together at Carter Industrial. She in production, I in accounting. We were friends." Margaret took an old folder from her purse. "When I saw your story on the news, I knew I had to come, because there's something you don't know, something nobody knows." "What?" Margaret opened the folder. Inside were yellowed documents, photographs, handwritten letters. "Your mother didn't just have shares in Carter Industrial. She had something else. Something she discovered right before she died." Emily leaned forward. "What did she discover?" "That the negligence at the plant wasn't accidental. That someone had intentionally sabotaged the safety protocols." "What? Why?" "Insurance," Margaret said simply. "If there were accidents, the company could collect millions in insurance, and someone in management was diverting that money." Emily felt nauseous. "My mother knew?" "She discovered it, and she was gathering evidence to report it." Margaret pulled out more papers. "Sarah gave me copies of everything. She told me, if anything happens to me, give this to the authorities. But when she died, I was afraid. The company was powerful. I was just an employee. I had 2 children. So I kept the documents and ran." Tears rolled down Margaret's cheeks. "I've lived with that guilt for years, watching them close the case, watching them pay pittances to families, knowing I had the evidence to bring justice. But I was a coward." "You weren't a coward," Emily said softly. "You were protecting your family. But now you have a voice," Margaret said, "and I have evidence, and together we can finish what your mother started." Emily took the documents, read them slowly, internal emails, orders for delayed maintenance, inflated insurance policies, and names of executives who'd orchestrated everything. And on the list, a name that made Emily's world stop. Victoria Ashford hadn't just covered up the accidents. She'd facilitated them. She'd given specific orders to delay maintenance. She'd falsified safety reports. She'd collected fraudulent insurance. It wasn't negligence. It was corporate murder. Emily looked at Margaret. "Why are you giving me this now?" "Because I saw what you did at that gala. I saw your courage, and I thought, if Sarah were alive, she'd be proud. And I realized it's time to do the right thing. Emily closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, about the strong woman who'd raised her, about the frustrated engineer who always told her, "Study, honey, change the world, do what I couldn't do." She opened her eyes. I need to talk to Richard. An hour later, Emily and Margaret were in Richard's office. He read the documents in silence. His face showed no emotion, but his knuckles were white from gripping the papers. He stopped. This is criminal, not just negligence. It's intentional fraud. Murder. What can we do? Emily asked. Go to the authorities. Today. Now. Will it be enough? Richard looked at her. With this evidence, Victoria won't just lose everything. She'll go to prison. For years. Emily felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. It won't bring back my mother? No, Richard admitted. But it will prevent it from happening to someone else. And that's what your mother would have wanted. Emily nodded. Then let's do it. Richard took his phone. I'll call my lawyer. We'll go together. And this time, real justice will be done. But before he could dial, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Richard answered on speakerphone. Yes? Richard. Victoria's voice sounded broken. I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I'm begging you. There was something in her voice. Real desperation. Richard looked at Emily. She nodded. You have 5 minutes. I know you know, Victoria said. I know you have evidence, and I know my life is over. You should have thought about that before. I know. And you're right. I did unforgivable things. But I need you to know something. I need her to know. What? When I started at Carter Industrial, I wasn't evil. I was ambitious, yes, but not evil. And then I met men who told me, this is how the world works. Either you eat or you get eaten. And I chose to eat. Her voice broke. Every terrible decision I made was to prove I was as tough as them, that I could be ruthless, that I deserved to be at that table, and at some point I forgot who I'd been. You expect compassion? Richard's voice was ice. No, I expect Emily to know her mother was a better person than me, that Sarah Carter had the courage I never had, and that if I could turn back time... She stopped. It doesn't matter. I can't. So I'll just say this. I deserve what's coming, and I'm so sorry for destroying something as beautiful as that woman's life. And she hung up. The silence in the office was heavy. Emily didn't know what to feel. Anger, satisfaction, pity. Don't forgive her, Margaret said softly. But don't let her guilt take your peace either. Emily nodded. I don't forgive her, but I don't hate her either, because hatred would give her power over me, and she has none anymore. Richard smiled sadly. Your mother would be proud. I know, Emily said. And now let's finish what she started. The following months were a whirlwind. Authorities arrested Victoria Ashford. Charges included fraud, criminal negligence, and criminal conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no bail. Other Carter Industrial executives were arrested too. The case became one of Spain's biggest corporate scandals. Ashford Energy Corporation survived but transformed. Richard implemented strict safety protocols, created an independent ethics department, and donated $20 million to the Sarah Carter Fund. Emily became the fund's director. She didn't just manage the money, she also gave voice to families who'd been silenced. And something else happened. Emily went back to school. She finished her engineering degree, this time with all the resources she needed. She graduated with honors and began developing renewable energy projects for low-income communities. Richard and she became close. Not romantic, the age difference and circumstances made that complicated. But there was deep respect between them. He'd given her back her future. She'd reminded him of his humanity. And together they'd created something neither could have done alone. Justice. A year later, on the anniversary of the Sarah Carter Fund, Emily would receive a message that would close the circle in the most beautiful way. New York shone under the spring sun. Emily Carter went up on stage at the Sarah Carter Institute wearing a white dress. Not by accident. It was a statement. A reclamation. The last white dress had been destroyed. This one was whole. Beautiful. Hers. A year ago, she said into the microphone, looking at 200 people, I was on the floor. Today I'm here. Not because I'm special, but because someone decided my dignity mattered. She looked at Richard in the front row. He nodded with a small smile. This institute is for the invisible, the silenced, those who never make headlines. This door will be open as long as I breathe. Applause filled the hall. After the event, a young woman knocked on her door. Miss Carter, my name is Sophie. My father died in a workplace accident. The company silenced us. I saw your story and... Can you help me? Emily smiled. Yes, I can. And she knew that was her mother's true legacy. Not the money, not the fame, but turning pain into hope for others. That night, alone in her office, Emily took out an old photo, her and her mother, 12 years old, hugging, smiling. She placed it next to her diploma and a plaque that read, Sarah Carter Institute, where dignity is not negotiable. We did it, Mom, she whispered. She went out to the balcony. The wind played with her hair. New York's lights shone like fallen stars. For the first time in years, Emily Carter didn't feel invisible. She felt complete. Because she finally understood what her mother always knew. Dignity isn't given to you by anyone, and no one can take it away. This is a story of humiliation transformed into dignity, of invisibility transformed into voice, of pain transformed into purpose. If it touched your heart, share it. Because somewhere there's someone who needs to know the torn dress doesn't define who you are. Subscribe for more stories that remind you human goodness still exists, that justice is possible, and that you're never just what others say you are. You are what you choose to be. And Emily Carter chose to be unforgettable.